We're back with Authors Unplugged and our guest, Darlene Quinn, award-winning author of Webs of Fate, Webs of Power, and Twisted Webs.
Now, Darlene, before we had to sneak away, we got a glimpse inside your characters and storylines. But at what point did you say to yourself, hey, I'm an author?
Well, I never expected to be one. I grew up with sight reading, and my greatest creativity in writing tended to be in spelling. My teachers didn't really admire it. In fact, they put little red marks around them, and my papers had the measles. So although I've been a storyteller all my life, I never expected to be in print. However, when I resigned from Bullock-Wilshire to take care of my daughter, who was finishing her last year in high school, I did the things that most women think, if I didn't have to go to work, boy, I really have to hit the closet and get this straightened out. I did that, but I didn't like the repetition. So I started doing some writing for professional journals. If it hadn't been for the day of computers, I would never have been able to write, because typewriters don't spell any better than I did. But I did some articles on time management, negotiating skills, interviewing skills for some professional journals. And then I got an article with Savvy Magazine, which was time management, how to have fun and get it done. From there, I won a contest for a poetry. Now, I don't write poems. I just happened to take a class to hone my skills in writing, and one of the assignments was to write a poem. I thought, I don't do poems. I'm not going to do that, but I'm also somewhat compulsive. I had an assignment, so I did it. My father, who thought everything I did was very wonderful, turned it into a poetry anthology, and it won. And with that came a correspondence course for either nonfiction or fiction. That's when I decided to do fiction. And I decided not letting the facts get in the way of a story was really fun.
And before your time in retail, you were a teacher, right?
Yes, I was. I was a teacher in the public school system. I also did some professional modeling and taught charm classes and modeling classes through Bullock's department store as a private contractor. I also did some work with the underprivileged. Then I had to go to work full-time. So I decided, I put this resume together, and it was like being all dressed up with nowhere to go. Had I sent it to a personnel department, I probably would have gotten a nice note back saying, if anything comes up, we'll let you know. But instead, I called Bullock's department stores and wanted to know who was in charge. I sent my resume to the CEO. Now, the resume, CEO isn't going to interview you, but the power of that going to the personnel department brings you in.
So you really did reinvent yourself. And now you're not only a successful author, but a very well-respected public speaker as well.
Right. You were also the keynote speaker at the Braille Institute annual library event, correct?
Yes, it was a very exciting call when I was asked to do that. They are also now picking up Webs of Power to make into an audiobook and a Braille book for the vision impaired. They have an awesome organization, so I was extremely excited to get that event.
That's incredible. Darlene, hearing all of this, I really don't know how you have time for yourself.
Really, I can see why you had difficulty finding time to write Webs of Power.
Actually, I think we have to all have time for ourselves. We can't give too much to others unless we find time to take care of ourselves. And I also, along with that, have time for fun. So, you have to get out and talk to people. I like to talk to my readers. One of the fascinating things about becoming an author is I told you I had a checkered resume, so I've done lots of things, and I never left one profession because I didn't like it. I just kept finding things I liked better. Being an author gives me a chance to talk about my passion, write about my passion, so this is my most favorite job.
Do you ever get writer's block?
No, I don't really believe in writer's block, although some authors talk about writer's block. I think really, have you ever heard of secretary's block or plumber's block?
No.
I think it's an excuse. And what does seem like a writer's block to some people and I talk to many writers in writers' conferences and writers' group, it mostly is the fear of not having it perfect. And I think that's what, for a writer to be successful, they have to be willing to write poorly, get that out of their system, and go forward.
That makes sense. Darlene, I'd really like to get back to your Webs series, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Can you share a little about the characters and the story of Webs of Power? Without giving away the ending, though. We don't want to spill all the beans.
As I told you, I write faction, so mine are character-driven stories based on real events. But I also shared with you that I sometimes have to tone down my characters, as was the case in Webs of Power. My corporate raider in Webs of Power is a man who's had 3 nervous breakdowns, liposuction, a facelift, a hair transplant, and he fills his pool with mineral water. But remember, I also told you fiction has to be believable. So my character does not have a wife and family in one city and a mistress and family in the other. All true of the Canadian who came to the U.S., was already running our second largest retail industry into bankruptcy, and he fell in love with Bloomingdale's. And he needed to go after all the Federated department stores. He could not afford all of it, and he sold the West Coast to Macy's. But that's not the story of Webs of Power. The story of Webs of Power is about 3 determined women whose worlds are turned upside down, and equally strong movers and shakers that change the landscape of retail as we know it today.
I have to ask really quickly, does anyone know that you wrote about them?
Absolutely. I have my favorite bitch in my book is a woman who is vain, manipulative, power hungry. She is also gorgeous and intelligent and has a heart. It's the character that people would love to hate, but because of her vulnerability, they don't. Well, I've made this person, she was actually taken after someone I worked with who now has a boutique on El Paseo in Palm Desert. And about a year ago, when I was on book tour, my husband and I called her for breakfast, and she said, "Was I really that bad?" She brought me into her boutique to give me more information. She liked being a character.
Wow.
And she also gave me an idea that is implemented in unpredictable webs. And she told me for Viviana to be really interesting, she needs to become a cougar, as she had.
I love that. She now wants to give you information about her for your next books. I think Rachel and I would be great characters, just so you know. And Twisted Webs is 100% heart-pounding suspense right from the prologue. Even though it's the second book in the series, it really is a great read all by itself. Fill us in on the continuation of that story.
And remember, no bean spilling.
No, and actually I'm going to tell you something that might sound like bean spilling. But my readers always know more about what's going on in the story than any one character does. So mine are more like thrillers. Twisted Webs begins with one of my main characters delivering twins. On the day of their birth, one of the twins is taken from the hospital. You start with the prologue. It is the first page and a quarter, which can also be read on my website. And you know who the kidnapper is, you know why he has taken this child, and you find out he is a good, religious man who out of love and desperation has committed this heinous crime.
That's so cool for the reader to know all that. That's really neat. I mean, your books are just nonstop. Greed, suspense, backstabbing. The entire book pulls you in and doesn't let you go. Did you plan out the story before you wrote it, or did it just take on a life of its own?
Well, I'm sort of an intuitive writer. I usually know where the story is starting and where it is ending. How I get there, I don't know. In fact, with Twisted Webs, I had done a lot of research on identical twins, and one of the really cool things that I was going to have was these babies they make up their twin top. but I'll be darned if Mario didn't kidnap that twin, and they never had a chance to do it.
Shoot. But even though you let the story discover itself, do you have a pretty good idea of where it will end up?
I usually do. I know where it's going to begin. I know where it's going to end. However, Twisted Webs did not end up at the same time I expected it to. I thought I could bring it to present day, but I'll be darned if Mario taking this twin when they were born, which is in 1990, the twins were getting too old. I knew I had to bring them together, so that never happened. We ended in 1998.
Darlene, I love the way your characters kind of sneak up on you, and you have such a unique writing style. The short chapters keep the reader on the edge of their seat, and
Why did you just do that?
do what?
You scooted up on the edge of your seat when you said that.
I most certainly did not.
Okay. Before Rachel falls off her chair, we're going to pause.
And when we come back, we'll talk more about Darlene's latest book, Webs of Fate, and the upcoming Unpredictable Webs.